In the quiet twilight of a suburban evening, under the glow of streetlights that cast long shadows across manicured lawns, a figure moved stealthily toward the wrought iron gate. The man, dressed in a crisp uniform emblazoned with the HOA emblem, glanced around nervously before hoisting himself up, his boots scraping against the metal bars. This wasn't his first time. The fence had become a symbol of his unchecked authority, a barrier he crossed at will to enforce petty rules on those he deemed outsiders. But tonight was different. As his hands gripped the top rail, a sudden crackle pierced the air like lightning trapped in a bottle. His body jerked violently, muscles seizing in an involuntary dance before he tumbled backward onto the grass, twitching and gasping. From the shadowed porch across the yard, another man watched, his silhouette unmoving, a faint smile playing on his lips in the dim light. He had waited for this moment, the culmination of months of silent endurance. The air hummed with the faint buzz of electricity, a warning that echoed through the neighborhood like a silent rebellion. What had driven this homeowner to turn his own gate into a weapon of defense? It was a story rooted deep in the soil of prejudice, where a simple fence marked not just property lines but the boundaries of dignity and respect. The patrolman's cries faded into the night, but the spark of that encounter ignited something far larger, a confrontation with the hidden, currents of racism that flowed beneath the surface of this seemingly idyllic community. As the man on the porch sipped his coffee, unflinching, the scene promised a tale of injustice met with ingenuity, where the oppressed flipped the script on their oppressors. How far would one go to protect their home from those who saw them? As perpetual intruders? The answer lay in the wires that now guarded his peace, a shocking reminder that patience has its limits. Marcus had always dreamed of a quiet life, the kind where hard work paid off with stability and a place to call his own. Born in a bustling city where opportunities were scarce for a young black man like him, he had clawed his way up through long hours at a tech firm, saving every penny until he could afford a modest house in Willow Creek, a gated suburb known for its pristine streets and tight-knit community. The neighborhood was a far cry from the crowded apartments of his youth, with wide driveways, blooming gardens, and families waving from porches. But from the moment he moved in, Marcus felt the subtle shift in the air, like a chill wind that followed him wherever he went. Whispers at the community mailbox, sidelong glances during evening walks. These were the first signs that he didn't quite belong in their eyes. The HOA, led by a self-appointed patrol of retirees and busybodies, enforced rules with an iron fist. Lawn heights, paint colors, even the type of flowers in window boxes, all scrutinized under the guise of maintaining property values. For most residents, it was an annoyance, but for Marcus, it became a targeted ordeal. His home, with its simple, beige siding and neatly trimmed hedges, somehow always drew their attention. Notes left on his door about unsightly garbage bins placed a minute too early, warnings about his car's oil spot on the driveway that no one else's seemed to warrant. He complied at first, smiling politely, believing it was just the price of suburbia. But as weeks turned to months, the patrols grew bolder. Led by Harold, a grizzled former cop with a perpetual scowl, they began peering over his fence during routine inspections, claiming to check for violations that didn't exist. Marcus noticed how they never treated his white neighbors the same. No unannounced visits to the Johnsons' backyard or nitpicking the Smiths' holiday decorations. The setting deepened his isolation. Willow Creek sat on the edge of a larger town where old prejudices lingered like fog in the valleys. Marcus, in his mid-40s, with a warm demeanor and a habit of reading on his porch, tried to integrate. He attended meetings, volunteered, for cleanups, but the stares persisted. One evening, as he grilled in his backyard, he caught Harold climbing the fence, binoculars in hand, supposedly looking for unauthorized structures. Marcus's heart raced, a mix of anger and humiliation surging through him. He said nothing then, but the intrusion planted a seed of resolve. Why him? The answer was unspoken but clear. His skin color made him suspect, an eternal outsider in a place that prided itself on uniformity. Curiosity built within him. How much more would they push? He began documenting the incidents, photos on his phone of footprints in his flower beds, timestamps of their unwelcome gazes. The neighborhood's facade cracked for him, revealing the undercurrents of racial bias that made his dream home feel like a battleground. Little did the patrol know, Marcus's background in electronics from his tech job would soon turn that curiosity into a plan, one that would electrify the dynamics of Willow Creek forever. As the season shifted from the warm hues of autumn to the crisp bite of winter, Marcus's life in Willow Creek transformed into a silent siege. The initial intrusions, once sporadic, escalated into a pattern that wore on his spirit like constant drizzle eroding stone. Harold and his patrol, a group of 3 or 4 self-righteous locals who fancied themselves guardians of the community's standards, began making regular rounds past Marcus's house. They drove slowly in Harold's old pickup, eyes scanning his property as if it were a crime scene waiting to happen. Marcus, from his living room window, would see them pause, point, and jot notes on clipboards. The injustice stung deeply, a reminder of the microaggressions he had faced throughout his life, from being followed in stores as a teenager to being overlooked for promotions despite his qualifications. One chilly morning, Marcus stepped outside to retrieve his newspaper and found a citation taped to his mailbox. It claimed his fence was non-compliant with height regulations, though he had measured it himself upon installation, exactly 6 feet as per the bylaws. He knew it was bogus. The neighbor 2 doors down had a 7-foot privacy wall that went unmentioned. When he confronted Harold at the next HOA meeting, held in the community center with its fluorescent lights and folding chairs, the room fell quiet. Harold, standing at the podium with his arms crossed, dismissed him with a wave. "We're just ensuring fairness for everyone," he said, but his tone carried the weight of unspoken bias. Marcus felt the eyes on him, the subtle nods among the crowd that confirmed his suspicions. He was the only black homeowner in the development, and that made every rule apply doubly to him. The tension built gradually, like pressure in a fault line. Marcus started keeping a journal, detailing each incident. December 15th. Patrol car idled outside for 20 minutes, shining flashlights into windows after dark. January 3rd. Footprints in the snow along the side yard, evidence of someone circling the house. He installed security cameras, small discreet ones hidden in the eaves, capturing the patrol's boldness. One video showed Harold attempting to open the gate latch, rattling it when it wouldn't budge, then peering through the bars like a warden inspecting a cell. Marcus watched the footage repeatedly, his frustration mounting. Why couldn't he just live in peace? The neighborhood, with its holiday lights twinkling on every other house, excluded him in subtle ways. No invitations to block parties, no friendly chats over fences. It was as if his presence disrupted their homogeneous ideal. By spring, the EO harassment intensified. Buds bloomed on trees, but Marcus's resolve hardened. The patrol began leaving anonymous notes, typed on plain paper, slipped under his door. "Your property is bringing down the neighborhood. Consider selling." The words cut like knives, echoing the redlining practices of decades past that had kept people like him out of such areas. Marcus researched the history of Willow Creek online, late at night, discovering it had been built on land once restricted by covenants against non-white ownership. Though those laws were long gone, the mindset lingered. He felt the emotional stakes rising. This wasn't just about a fence or rules. It was about his right to exist without constant scrutiny. One afternoon, as rain pattered on the roof, Marcus heard the familiar creak of his gate. From the kitchen, he saw 2 patrol members, Harold, and a woman named Karen, who always wore a visor and carried a measuring tape. They had pushed the gate open, It was unlocked that day for a delivery, and were wandering into his backyard. Marcus's pulse quickened. They poked at his garden shed, claiming to inspect for illegal additions. He stepped out, but before he could speak, they waved him off, saying it was official business. The intrusion felt visceral, a violation of his sanctuary. That night, lying awake, Marcus replayed the scene. The injustice burned. How many times had his ancestors faced similar overreach, from sharecropping lands to segregated housing? He decided enough was enough. Marcus's tech expertise became his ally. He spent weekends in his garage tinkering with wires and circuits. He ordered components online, insulated cables, a low-voltage transformer, solar-powered batteries, to create a non-lethal electric fence system. It wasn't meant to harm severely, just to deliver a startling jolt, like touching a doorknob after shuffling on carpet, but amplified. He researched laws meticulously, ensuring it complied with local ordinances for property defense. No signs. Needed if it was on private land, but he added subtle warnings anyway. Small plaques reading, "High voltage, half hidden by vines." As he worked, sweat beading on his forehead, the emotional tension coiled tighter. This was more than gadgetry. It was reclaiming agency in a world that sought to diminish him. The patrol's actions grew more brazen. In summer's heat, they climbed the fence for the first time. Marcus's cameras caught it. Harold, grunting as he pulled himself up, dropping into the yard to check the pool filter. Marcus didn't even have a pool. The video showed him rummaging near the shed before climbing back out. Marcus reported it to the police, but the officer, an old friend of Harold's, brushed it off as a misunderstanding. The dismissal fueled Marcus's fire. Systemic bias at play, where complaints from black residents were minimized. He shared the footage anonymously on a neighborhood app, but it was deleted by moderators, HOA insiders. Isolation deepened, but so did his determination. Months passed, each incident layering on the last. A second climb, Karen scaling the fence to photograph his barbecue grill, claiming it violated fire codes. Marcus watched from inside, fists clenched. He upgraded the system, connecting the gate's metal frame to the circuit, testable with a multimeter. The buzz when activated was faint, undetectable from the street. He tested it on a glove. Zap, a sharp tingle. Safe, but effective. The stakes rose. If caught, he could face lawsuits, but the alternative was endless erosion of his dignity. As fall approached again, the patrol's routine solidified. They targeted him weekly, climbing when gates were locked. Marcus's journal filled pages. Dates, times, descriptions. Emotional wear showed. Sleepless nights, strained work performance. But curiosity turned to anticipation. He knew they'd come again. Patterns of prejudice were predictable. One evening, he sat on the porch, pretending to read, the system armed, via a remote in his pocket. The air thick with impending storm, he waited, the tension palpable, like the calm before thunder. The injustice had built to a breaking point, racial undercurrents surging toward an inevitable clash. Would his plan work, or would it backfire, reinforcing the very biases he fought? The neighborhood slumbered unaware, but Marcus was wide awake, ready for the spark that would illuminate the darkness. The evening sun dipped low, painting the sky in fiery oranges that mirrored the simmering rage within Marcus. He positioned himself on the porch swing, a mug of cooling tea in hand, eyes fixed on the gate like a sentinel guarding ancient ruins. The remote control lay discreetly in his lap, its button a promise of retribution. Harold's truck rumbled down the street, stopping with a squeak of brakes. Out stepped Harold and Karen, clipboards in tow, their faces set in familiar determination. They approached the fence, peering through the bars, then Harold nodded, a signal Marcus had seen before. Without hesitation, Harold gripped the lower rungs, hoisting his bulky frame upward. His boots found purchase, and he climbed, the metal clanging softly under his weight. Karen watched, whispering something, her measuring tape dangling like a noose. As Harold reached the top, straddling the rail, Marcus's thumb hovered over the button. Time slowed. The world narrowed to this moment, the culmination of endless violations. With a steady breath, Marcus pressed it. The circuit closed instantly. A sharp crackle erupted, blue sparks dancing along the gate's frame. Harold's body convulsed, eyes widening in shock as electricity coursed through him. Not enough to kill, but plenty to stun. His grip loosened and he plummeted backward, landing in a heap on the sidewalk with a thud that echoed through the quiet street. He writhed, cursing under his breath, limbs twitching as residual jolts faded. Karen screamed, dropping her clipboard, rushing to his side but freezing when she saw the faint smoke curling from his singed shirt. Marcus remained seated, his expression calm, though his heart pounded like a drum. The intensity peaked. This was the dramatic apex, where injustice met its match. Harold staggered to his feet, face red with fury and humiliation, pointing accusingly at the house. But Marcus didn't move, his gaze steady, a silent declaration of boundaries redrawn. Neighbors' lights flickered on, curtains parting as curious faces appeared. The air buzzed with the aftermath, the scent of ozone lingering like victory. Karen fumbled for her phone, dialing frantically, but Harold waved her off, limping toward the truck. The jolt had shaken more than his body. It had exposed the fragility of their assumed power. Marcus watched them drive away, the truck's taillights fading into the dusk. The climax hung heavy, a turning point where one man's stand against racial targeting rippled outward, forcing the community to confront its shadows. In the days following the incident, Willow Creek buzzed with a different energy. Whispers spread like wildfire through backyard fences and group chats. Tales of the shocking event at Marcus's house. Harold, nursing bruises and a dented ego, filed a complaint with the police, claiming assault. But Marcus was prepared. He presented his footage, a montage of prior trespasses, each one time-stamped and irrefutable. The officer, the same one who had dismissed him before, now shifted uncomfortably, muttering about property rights. No charges stuck. The electric system was legal, a defensive measure against repeated invasions. The HOA board called an emergency meeting, but attendance swelled with residents who had silently observed the bias for too long. Marcus's stand became a catalyst. A few neighbors, emboldened, shared their own stories, subtle discriminations against minority families that had gone unchecked. An Asian couple down the street revealed similar citations. A Latino family spoke of ignored maintenance requests. The resolution unfolded not in drama, but in quiet shifts. Harold resigned from the patrol, his authority eroded. Karen faded into the background, her visor no longer a symbol of intimidation. The HOA revised its bylaws, mandating training on implicit bias, though Marcus knew real change came slower. Emotionally, Marcus found peace. The porch, once a vantage for vigilance, became a place of reflection. He sat there evenings, watching kids play, feeling integrated at last. The gate stood unchanged, its wires a silent guardian, but the buzz was gone, deactivated, no longer needed. The impact rippled beyond Willow Creek. Local news picked up the story, framing it as a modern tale of racial resilience. Online forums discussed it, sparking conversations about suburban racism and self-defense. The powerful takeaway lingered. In a world where prejudice climbs fences uninvited, empowerment lies in drawing lines that shock the system into awareness. What if more stood firm against subtle injustices? Perhaps then communities could truly bloom for all.